I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was for Frank. He doesn't know any difference. Somebody had a bee in their bonnet, and it just got loose. I don't know what to tell you. It's just one of those things that happens. Alex mentioned it. You rely on technology, and sometimes technology just gets you right at the worst time. But who knows? It may just suddenly pop back on here in a minute, or we may be without it for the rest of the day. Maybe by next week it'll be back, or next month, or whatever. If we have to, we will just do it the way they did it before technology was invented. Because our brethren used to do this sort of thing in caves. And they were hunkered down, and they were huddled close, and they just sang, and they all heard each other sing, and they preached, and they heard each other preach. So, can everybody hear me right now? Is it okay? I feel bad for those of you who are in the front who aren't hard of hearing, because I'm going to be yelling a lot more than even I usually do. But let's try, as was said a moment ago, let's try to focus. I want you to focus your minds with me on a few pivotal moments in human history. I have a handful of significant historical events that I want to draw your attention to this morning. Today is a special day. It is, in our minds, focus now, it is the night before. It is not. It is the morning. It is a Sunday morning, but we're imagining. We're using our minds. You've heard of the French nation. You've heard of the British nation. This is the imagination. We are using our minds, and we are remembering back to a pivotal moment in history. It is the night before God sent the flood. What was the state of the world before God rained water on the earth? In a word, bad. And I choose that word particularly because when God first finished making this world, He looked at it and said, yeah, that's very good. And then He left us to make it very bad. In fact, the world was so bad that when God looked down at the state of the world, He said all of their thoughts are only on evil continually. Imagine that. Now, it's going to be save Noah, other than him, and perhaps, if you want to be charitable, Noah's sons, wives, and Noah's wife themselves. Maybe they were all also with him, and Noah just kind of takes the leadership role as the patriarch. Or it maybe was the case that at first, Noah was the only one, and he had to convert his wife and his sons and their wives back to faithfulness to God. But either way, we're talking either one family out of the whole world that was wicked. Either one or the whole family of just one group out of the whole world lie in wickedness. And God looked down other than them and said, every thought that pops into their brains that I gave them is against me. Every desire that comes to the hearts that I gave them is against me. And so what do you do in that situation? If you were the maker, you would probably, like the maker did, decide to unmake. So God said, I will flood the earth. God looked at the condition of the world and He said, something must be done, and I will take, follow me with this thought, I'm going to use this throughout the sermon, corrective measure. I'm going to do something to solve the problem. And what did He do? When the time was right and the ark was finished, Noah got in the boat, Noah's wife got in the boat, Noah's sons got in the boat, Noah's sons' wives got in the boat, and all the animals that God had allowed Noah to put in the boat got in the boat, and then God shut the door, and the rains came down, and the floods came up. The fountains of the deep opened. Imagine every volcano on earth erupting all at once and spewing forth not molten lava, but the water that God had stored below. Imagine every cloud in the sky breaking forth and raining down, not just the small little amounts of water it had collected a little bit here and a little bit there, but an entire canopy of water that God had put in place there from the beginning, separating the waters from the waters to make dry ground, and then, as a result of man's sin, causing the waters to come back together, encasing the world in water once more. God took corrective measure. One night before the flood, 'twas the night before the flood, and all through the world wickedness abounded, and God said, enough. Have another one. 'Twas the night before Sodom fell. 'Twas the night before the cities that are synonymous with wickedness were destroyed, and God sent fire and brimstone. Open your Bibles, if you can, to Genesis chapter 18. And I did not anticipate having to yell through a reading such as this, but I'm going to yell through a reading such as this. I want to read it in its entirety, Genesis 18, 20 through 32. The setting is God once more has looked down on his creation. And what has he found? But wickedness. In this case, localized, centralized, focused in one city metropolis. Two cities together, side by side, both engaging in the same similar sin. And God said, because of the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. And the men turned their faces from thence, and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Pause for just a second. Abraham takes upon himself the role of an intermediary. A mediator, an intercessor, as a patriarch, as a man of God, as a faithful follower of God, a frequent converser with God. He steps in front of God's white-hot wrath ready to be poured out on these wicked cities and those wicked cities. But he comes not on behalf of the wicked ones, but on behalf of the faithful ones. Surely there are some righteous people there, he says to God. Surely you would not destroy the righteous with the wicked, throw out the baby with the bathwater. That would not be just, and you are supposed to be the judge here. You would not do something unjust, would you, God? He goes on to say, if I could find 50 righteous people in the city, would you not then spare it? And God says, all right, Abraham, I'll play the game with you. God already knows. God's made up his mind. He doesn't have to haggle. He doesn't have to negotiate. He's doing this for Abraham's sake, if nothing else. So he plays along. If you can find 50 righteous people in the combined cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, then I will not level them to the ground. And Abraham says, well, as long as I've got you on the line, what if I only find 45? Surely you won't destroy 45 just because I couldn't find 5 more. And God says, all right, if you find 45, I won't destroy it for 45. What about 40? And God says, all right, if you find 40, okay. But 30? And God says, if you find 30, I won't destroy for 30. Well, if you'll take 30, surely you'll take 20. This is just the text. I'm just summarizing it. If you'll take 30, surely you'll take 20. And God says, if you find 20, I'll spare the city for the 20 righteous you find there. And Abraham says, I don't want to push my luck. I got one more. What if I find 10? What if I find 10? Now think about this for a second. We're talking about not the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, not the houses of Sodom and Gomorrah, not the villages, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't know how big they were. I might be way low-balling it, but let's just pretend we're using our imaginations. Let's pretend we're not talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's pretend we're talking about Batesville and Southside. Combined population of the two is what, like 10,000? That might be low-balling it, 10 to 12, something like that. And there's 300 plus people here out of, let's highball it, 12,000 people. If I'm Abraham and I say, God, don't destroy the cities of Batesville and Southside if I can find 50. Could I find 50 righteous people in these two cities? And Abraham wears it all the way down to just 10. If I could just find 10. Listen, there's 30 times as many of that plus in this room alone of just people. Would you all be counted among the faithful? That's for God to determine. Abraham's just there to find them. But he said in the whole combined cities, let's say of 12,000, it might have been more, but let's just say, he only needed to find 10, and God would have spared the people. 'Twas the night before God leveled Sodom and Gomorrah, and there were not 10 righteous people to be found. Keep reading Genesis 19, 28 and 29. He looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the lands of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. There was Lot, and for a hot minute there, Lot's wife too, but didn't last because she turned around. That's the sermon you'll get next year. Remember Lot's wife. She turned around, so she wasn't faithful. But Lot was. That's what? 1 out of a city. If I was to say to God, don't destroy this building if I could find 10 faithful people in this building, that's still 10 out of 340 we might have in here? What if it ended up God destroyed this building and all the people in it except for 1? What if he only found 1 faithful person? That's how bad things were in Sodom and Gomorrah. 'Twas the night before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. He looked down at the wickedness of the city, not just at the thoughts of their heart, but at the deeds which they had done, with the wickedness they had engaged in. And God said, something must be done. I must take corrective measure. I see a problem, and I must solve it. And He solves it here, not with a flood of water, but with a raining down of fire and brimstone from the sky. I got another one. 'Twas the night before Midian was destroyed. 'Twas the night before Gideon the judge was sent to save his people from Midian. If you don't know the account, you can open your Bibles there to Judges chapter 6, and I'll read with you verses 1 and 2. Judges 6, 1 and 2. I love the story of Gideon. I'd like to spend more time with you talking about it, but I'd go hoarse. Judges chapter 6, verse 1. The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel, and because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made them dens which are in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Israel sinned. The judge said, you're guilty, here's your punishment. Midian, the evil nation that neighbors them, will come in, invade the land, take over the land, and drive my people into caves and hiding places and dens where they could just stay in shelter, but they will not have their homesteads. They will not have their farmlands. They will not have their livestock. They will not have their daily normalcy of life. It will all be taken from them as punishment for their sins. 'Twas the night before God did something about it, though. Not before God punished them. This 7 years later. Now God has said, I've done that. Now I've got to solve this problem, for lack of a better phrase. It's not really a problem. It's His punishment. But from Israel's perspective, they've got a problem, and its name is Midian. And that's a problem they can't solve on their own. And God says, are you ready to turn back to me? And they are. So God raises up Gideon, the judge. And through him, God solves the problem of Midian. On the night before He does, proverbially speaking, it's a lot more than just a night, but the whole process of Gideon gathering his army, it makes it so wonderful to read, and I'd encourage you to do so in Judges 6 and Judges 7. Because Gideon, as we would do, presumes he's going to have a big giant army to fight the big giant army of Midian that is occupying their land. And at first he starts out with a sizable fighting force. But slowly, by the providence and the preaching of God, that fighting force gets whittled and whittled and whittled until it's just Gideon and just some guys. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but just Gideon and a handful of people with him, comparatively speaking, to the vast army of Midian. But through that small, outnumbered number, God saves the day, and God executes His justice on Midian for what they had done to His people. Read with me Judges chapter 7, verses 19 through just about the beginning of verse 22. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him, and there's other hundreds over here and there, came to the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch. And they had but newly set the watch, and so they blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers in their hands. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers, and held the lamps in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands to blow withal. And they all cried, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. And the 300 blew their trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout the host. What's going on here? It is the middle of the night. It is the night before justice is served. It is the night before Israel is freed from Midian's grasp again. And on this night, the Midianite army has its guards set out, as you would do. And Gideon, with his small, outnumbered force, surrounds the camp of the Midianites. They have pitchers, they have torches, they have trumpets, and when the sound comes, when the cue is given, they break the pitchers, they blow the trumpets. It sounds, if you're in the dark, and you're just this quiet little army, and you're not expecting anything, it sounds like you've suddenly been surrounded by this huge fighting force, and why wouldn't you think that? Because of course you would have a big fighting force. That's what God thought. That's what Gideon thought, till God whittled him down to his little bitty group. So they assume, oh no, we're surrounded by a huge fighting force and we're not prepared. We can't see. Let's all draw our swords. We run this way to fight. Trumpets are blowing. We run that way to fight. Trumpets are blowing. Suddenly they start stabby everywhere they can stab, and they start stabbing each other. And the Midianites do the dirty work of the Israelites and defeat themselves, basically, by the providence, power, and foreworking of God. The next day dawns, and Israel is free. Thanks to Gideon, but really thanks to God. Because God looked down that last night and He said, Midian is a problem. I'm going to solve it. I'm going to take corrective measures. I'm going to raise up my judge, Gideon, and through him, I'm going to save the day. I'm going to do so not with a flood of water. I'm going to do so not with a raining down of fire. Not some big grandiose divine display, but just with an appointed person, doing an appointed thing at an appointed time, God will save the day. 'Twas the night before Christ was born. 'Twas the night before, verse 20, 21, 22. 'Twas the night before God sent His Son. 'Twas the night before Jesus was born. God looks down at the world, and what does He see? He saw what He saw in Genesis. He saw what He saw later in Genesis. He saw what He saw when He looked down in Judges. He saw land, but in this case a whole world, consumed by evil, filled with a problem that He needs to solve, because I can't solve this one. You can't solve it either. All of us collectively together can't solve this one. It's a problem of sin, and it requires a Savior. But think about this. It was 1 year ago, almost to the day, that I stood right here and I preached to you a sermon entitled, "It Came Upon the Midnight Clear." And I broke down that beautiful hymn that reflects on the birth of Christ and the offering of peace on earth and goodwill toward men. And the point of that sermon was the herald message of the angels of peace on earth and goodwill toward men should still be sung today. It should still be preached today, proclaimed today, that God offers you peace. And so I come bringing you peace, goodwill with each other, because God brought it down to us. There is a whole side of Jesus coming and Jesus' ministry devoted to goodwill and peace and prosperity in a spiritual way, and of the bringing of good feelings and happiness and contentment and satisfaction. All of that is there, and all of that is true. There's a whole other side of it, the whole other half of Jesus coming, that we overlook because it makes us uncomfortable, and it needs to be appreciated. So for that, as we consider the proverbial night before Christ was born, I invite you to Malachi chapter 4. And we're going to take these two verses backwards. I'm going to start in verse 2. Malachi 4, "If you are prepared for the coming of the Messiah, if you are ready for the birth of the King," Malachi says, "to you that fear my name," this is God speaking, "shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in His wings, and He shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall." You shall grow up, He says to the people, like calves of the stall, prospered, fed, taken care of, protected. "For you who fear my name," not everybody fears the name of God anymore. God looks down before the Son is born, and He says, there's a lot of people who are wicked. There's a lot of people who are unrighteous, but I see a faithful one here. I see some faithful ones there. It's not like in the days of Noah. There are some faithful here, and some faithful there, and some faithful over there. And for those who fear the name of God, who revere God, who are prepared to serve God, this dark period of sin in which you live will give way to divine sunrise. That's the S-U-N, not the S-O-N, Malachi says. The Son of Righteousness will arise with the warmth, the satisfaction, the peace that passes understanding, the healing in the wings of the rays of the sun. That's a beautiful thought. I love that picture. Hark, the herald angels sing, "Glory to this newborn King, peace on earth, mercy mild, God and sinner reconciled." Yeah, but what if I don't fear the name of God? For that, go back a verse. Malachi 4, verse 1. "For behold, the day comes, it will burn like an oven, and all the proud and all that do wickedly will be stubble. And the day that comes shall burn them up, says the Lord of hosts. It shall leave them neither root nor branch." If you do not fear God, if you are prideful within yourself and you only rely on yourself and trust in yourself and expect to get through life on your own without God, doing things your way, well, your way will lead you to sin. And then what will happen? Then your sinful heart will either break or your sinful heart will be broken. And if it breaks in humility, great, you will fear the Lord, and He will be like sunrise to a new morning. And if you do not fear the Lord, then you will be like, my Bible says, stubble. It is kindling, the fast flashing flame of the thing that you use to start the big fire. You're the thing that burns up first when the sunrise comes and the heat and the waves of heat that come out of it are sent over across the world. 'Twas the night before God sent His Son. And what was the picture that He saw? What was the picture that we painted for Him? It was one of wickedness, of evil, of discontentedness, of warfare and hatred and sinful in excess. And God said, that's a problem, and it needs a solution. I'm going to take corrective measures to fix that problem. This is not a traditional Christmas morning sermon or Christmas Eve sermon. I understand that. But the inspiration behind it is a quote from C.S. Lewis. If you'll permit me to step away from my Bible for just half a second, I want to read that quote to you. We find in our prayer book that Psalm 110 is one of those appointed for Christmas Day. And we may at first be surprised by this. There is nothing in it about peace and goodwill, nothing remotely suggestive of the stable at Bethlehem. The note is not peace and goodwill, but a warning. Beware, he is coming. Are you ready for the coming of the Messiah? Malachi says. If you are, it's like a sunrise after a long dark night. And if you are not, Malachi says, then you're kindling and you'll burn first. The coming of the Christ was a herald of peace. He was himself a herald of peace, bringing in the peace of God, but only for those who obeyed God. For those who serve self, his coming is a declaration that things will never be the same, that war has come to the world, and you must choose which side you're going to be on, the winning side, which is his, or the losing side, which is the devil's. And that's the message of Malachi, and that's the message of Psalm 110, which was read to us a moment ago, but I'd like to read it one more time. The Lord said to my Lord, David writes, sit thou at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord will send the rod of thy strength out of Zion and rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people shall be willing in the day of your power. In the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning, you have the dew of the youth. The Lord has sworn and will not repent. You're a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Your reign, your order will last forever. In other words, the Lord at your right hand shall strike through kings in the day of his wrath. He shall judge among the heathen. He'll fill the places with dead bodies. He'll wound the heads of many countries. He will drink of the brook in the way, like an invading army, the general leading an invading force, stopping wherever they want, to eat whatever they want, to drink wherever they want from whatever brook they come to, because it all belongs to him. He has conquered the world, in other words, and he will lift up his head in triumph and in victory, and you get to lift yours too. Oh, come all ye faithful, joyful, and, what's the word? Triumphant. Victor over an enemy. A stomper on the head of your enemy. And your enemy is the devil. Because God looked down at the state of the world one night before his son was born, and he said, that's a problem. My son is the solution. But I got one more for you. 'Twas the night before the son came back. I don't know when that one is. Tonight might be the night before Jesus returns. Tonight might be it. You might not see Christmas morning. I'm sorry to disappoint you children, but I promise you children, you'll love the next day if tonight is the last night you've got. This might be it for us, but it might not be. It might be tomorrow night. It might be 10 nights from now. It might be 10 years worth of nights from now. It might be 10,000 years worth of nights from now. But one day, when he decides, it will be the night before Christ returns. And when he looks down at the state of the world, what will he see? He will see sheep, and he will see goats. Listen to the Master, Matthew 25, 31 through, well, I got to turn there. Matthew 25, starting in verse 31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all his holy angels with him, then will be brought together all the nations, and he will divide them as sheep from goats. You know the text. Matthew 25, starting in verse 31. All right. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all his holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides sheep from goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. And shall the king then say to them on his right hand, come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world, because I was hungry, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to see me. Then the righteous will say, but God, when did we ever see you in such a state? And he will say, when you did these things to the least of these, when you took care of those who couldn't take care of themselves, when you tended to those who were in need, when you fed those who were hungry, when you gave drink to those who were thirsty, when you visited those who were in prison, when you aided those who were sick, when you did all those things to the least of humanity, you were doing them to me, who is the greatest of humanity. And then he will turn to the left, and he will say, and you didn't feed me, and you didn't give me a drop to drink, and you didn't come to see me when I was in prison, and you didn't give me aid when I was sick, and you didn't do anything to help me. And they'll say, but God, we never saw you in such a state. We stepped over all the other people, and if we had seen you, we would have gone to you. And he says, those you stepped over was me. and you didn't help them. And so these will go away to everlasting punishment, and the righteous to life eternal. It is the night before Christ returns. Maybe. Maybe it is. I don't know. Do you? No, you don't know. But if it is, that means you've got 12 hours to start finding people who need food, to start finding people who need water. You got 12 hours to start finding people who are sick that you can aid, who are in prison that you can visit. You got 12 hours, and maybe you don't. Maybe you should have done it yesterday because he's coming before I finish this sentence. We don't know. But whatever you've got, you better spend it. Whatever time you have left, you better use it to serve him in his way, as he tells you to do, lest you be a goat and not a sheep. Because tonight might be the night before Christ returns. And what will he find in such a state? What kind of world will he see when he looks down from his heavenly vista at this world beneath? He will find a world like in the days before the flood, a world full of thoughts that are only on evil continually. But not everyone. He will indeed find people whose actions are wicked all the time. He will find people who are obsessed with doing evil, but not everywhere. He will find some who are faithful here and some who are faithful there. He will find some, few there be that find it, but few will have found it. They will be grossly outnumbered by the evil that's in the world, but he will find us. But as for the rest of the world, it is a place of darkness. It is a place of despair. It is a place that even to the most uplifted of hearts, it can be discouraging. It can be despondent bringing. And we might think to ourselves, there is no peace anywhere. And so to those who think that, I would remind you that God is not dead, nor does he sleep. From the time of creation to the time of the flood, mankind got worse and worse and worse and worse. But God was not dead, and God was not asleep. God was patient until his patience ran out and the flood came down. While the sin and debauchery and evil of Sodom was running rampant, God was not dead. God was not asleep. God was patient, and God was waiting, and then his patience ran out, and so did the fire come down. While Midian occupied Israel for 7 years, God was not taking a 7-year nap. He was not asleep, and he was not dead. He was patient, and then his patience ran out, and Gideon conquered the Midianites. While the world lay in the darkness of sin, and it seemed to consume all the earth in darkness, God was not dead. God was not asleep. God was patient. And then his Son was born, and light came into the world, John chapter 1. And now here we are 2,000 years later, and the world is wicked and getting wickeder every day. And those who are faithful seem to be growing more outnumbered all the time. But God is not dead, nor does he sleep. And that's the message of the poem that I'm about to read to you, that I read to you every year, and I'm going to keep reading it as long as you let me. I heard the bells on Christmas Day. Their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat, peace on earth, goodwill to men. Till ringing, singing all the way, the world revolve from night to day. A voice, a chime, a chant sublime, peace on earth, goodwill to men. My thoughts now as the day had come, the belfries of all Christendom had rung so long this unbroken song, peace on earth, goodwill to men. This is a poem written during the Civil War. Thus the next line. Then from each dark accursed mouth the cannon thundered in the south, and with its sound the carols drowned out peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair, it was as if an earthquake had rent the hearthstones of a continent, and made forlorn the households born on peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair, I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said. I'm Noah the night before the flood. I'm Abraham the night before Sodom is destroyed. I'm Gideon the night before victory came. And I look around the darkness. I'm the world before Christ is born. There is no peace on earth, I said. For hate is strong, and it mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then peal the bells, more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor does he sleep. The wrong shall fail, and the right prevail with peace on earth, and it will last forever. Goodwill to men. What's your condition with Christ this morning? What's your relationship with God? Are you at peace, or are you living a life of sin which has caused loneliness and frustration and bitterness to take your heart? It can all be washed away, and I mean that literally. The water is prepared. The grave is waiting for you to bury your old life and rise to walk anew. And if you have already done that, if you have obeyed God's command for you to be baptized and wash away your sins, Acts 22:16, but since then you've let the darkness of the world creep in, or maybe you didn't want to let it, and it just did it anyway, because the devil can be very persistent, and now you feel darkness all around you. The light of Christ is not snuffed out. It can be back to you. We can encourage you, give you whatever you need to help you. Just let us know how we can help you right now. Please come as we stand and sing.